Welcome everybody. Today I'm going to be presenting this class, Growing Vegetables in Containers. My name is Heather Norman and I'm a veteran Master Gardener. A little bit about me is I grew up on the West Coast gardening with my mom, probably doing it very poorly, and moved to the East Coast where you can grow seeds and they sprout and grow. In 2008 I moved to New Mexico and called it my home, and failed miserably at gardening in Santa Fe for 2 years, and then came here and floundered until I found the Master Gardener program. That's been very helpful. And so, yeah, let's just jump right into it. Hopefully I can foster a passion for you for growing your own food like I have. So New Mexico State University offers this. The curriculum was developed by the Oregon Food Bank and then adapted for our climate. So it will make sense for us. And the ICANN program, and NMSU is the one who adapted it. So these are the things you'll learn today. We're going to go over what kind of plants are good to plant in containers, location, soil, watering, and plant specific. There's a lot of similarities and differences. You can plant a lot of different types of the same plants in a container or in the ground, but you have to keep in mind root spacing and things that we'll get into a little further. Water is one of the main differences because if it's in a small pot, it's going to need a lot more water than it's in the soil. It can pull water from a larger area. The growing season is about the same. Sunlight requirements about the same. Fertilizing and soil care is very different, and we'll go into that in depth. So placement and location. This is very important. You want at least 6 hours of sunlight per day. South facing, you can grow almost anything with keeping in mind that even heat-loving vegetables need a little bit of shade if they're exposed to 12 hours of sunlight. That's much outside the 6 hours requirement. West-east, most crops do very well. And root crops work really well on north-facing. If you're planting on a patio, or that's fine. If you're planting on a balcony or somewhere where there's space underneath, you'll want to think about the weight. If you have a big tub filled with soil, filled with water, filled with plants, that's going to quickly become very heavy. And then we'll also talk about vertical space and where to be space efficient. Container selection. This is very important. There's good containers and bad containers. Basically anything can be a good container if it doesn't leach harmful chemicals into your plant soil, and it can have a drainage hole. So, we use 5-gallon buckets, recycling bins, wine barrels. You can even use a bag of potting soil, cut some slits in it or holes, and plant directly into it. Just today I emptied my smoothie container when I was making my smoothie, and I was like, this is a great little pot. I think I'm going to plant some strawberries in it. And so I'm going to start saving those in the future instead of just recycling them. Bad containers, tires, treated wood. This includes pressure treated wood. This does not make your wood last longer. Has anyone ever used pressure treated wood for any projects? The only thing it has is it's pressure treated with insecticide. And so any kind of railroad tie or that green lumber you find at big box stores, that has insecticide, and you do not want that leaching into your plants, your soil, to be taken up by the roots and then eating that produce. So laundry, soap, and kitty litter containers, we also want to avoid those because of the same thing. We don't know what kind of chemicals are in there, and we don't want to absorb that into our body through our food. See-through containers are not ideal because most roots need darkness to grow. And if you're not giving them some darkness, it's going to have stunted growth. Preparing the containers. As I said, drainage holes is very important. You don't want to waterlog your plant roots. They will rot. And so there's some spacing here, recommended 1 hole per 2 square inches. I've even used little tomato cans and poked a few holes and planted herbs in there and given them as gifts. So you can really use almost anything. Avoid adding gravel to the bottom. I made this mistake a lot in my early years of gardening. And what it does is it creates a water and gravel layer, which just means your roots have less space to grow. And that's not ideal. Sanitize your containers. I think it's a 10 to 1, so 1 part bleach, 10 part water, and then you leave it for 5 minutes and rinse it out. And this helps your pots not carry any pathogens that could get your plants sick. So bacteria, viral, fungus, yes?
Are you able to just clean them the same way that you do with your dish soap as well, like using dish soap for it?
You can. I would dry it in the sun. I've definitely cleaned containers just using dish soap before with success and didn't have a problem with it. I think adding a little bit of hydrogen peroxide to that water kills mold, which regular dish soap does not. If you don't have access to that, a different option would be you could probably even do a little bit of salt with the soap. Or, yeah, I would recommend that. Good question. So New Mexico has 3 major growing areas. Right now, we're in growing area 2, mid-elevations. And so this is Albuquerque, Los Lunas. Lower areas such as Cruces or Roswell would be area 1. And then area 3 has high elevations, Santa Fe, Gallup, Tijeras. Is anyone from an area outside of area 2? Oh, all right, well this should be easy. So everything in area 2 is going to grow about the same. Sometimes you have microclimates. For instance, I was growing in an industrial space off of mountain, north of Mountain on 2nd, and it was surrounded by an industrial zone and concrete, and so I did raised boxes so I wouldn't have to worry about the toxicity of the soil. And I found that I could plant things out a month ahead of other people because of the heat battery of the concrete around there. All my farmer friends in the valley were a month behind, and that was kind of fun. It looks like we're all in area 2, and so a little bit more about microclimates is if you say the north side of a building will remain cooler, you can notice after it snows, it's the last place that snow melts. And so if you plant things there, know that it's going to take a little bit longer to warm up in spring, and it's going to get colder a little bit faster in winter. And we'll go more into the plant specifics in a little bit. Instead, we'll jump into soil and fertilizing. So potting soil is essential for containers. The reason you need potting soil is because plants planted directly in the ground have access to greater nutrients, micronutrients, and a larger soil base they can stretch out and pull from. There's more resources for the roots. And when you're potting in a soil, in a container, it's a very contained environment that only has a limited amount of resources, which is why it's imperative to fertilize. That's the only way you can get enough nutrition into the soil. If you reuse your potting soil, you must refresh it. What I mean by refreshing is a lot of people put it in a, lay it out, put clear plastic over it, and let the sun cook it for 4 to 6 weeks. This essentially bakes it, kills any pathogens, any fungus that would have developed over the growing season, and allows you to start off fresh, where you can fertilize it and then plant your plants and have really good success. So let's talk a little bit about what these numbers mean. and when to use fertilizer. So you're going to want to plant your plants and add some fertilizer to the soil then. And then at leaf development, once they really start leafing out, the plant is using a lot of resources, a lot of energy, and so you're going to want to give it some food. Just like when we're growing, we want some food. Flower development, flowers are the sexual component of the plant for reproducing seeds, and that also takes a lot of energy and nutrients. Fruit development, again, you are putting nutrition into the soil and fertilizer so that your plants can uptake it and give you all of the healthy benefits of the organic homegrown produce that you're making. You'll want to fertilize every 2 weeks, basically. So this happens pretty rapidly, the planting, leaf development, flower development. It's usually about a 2-week schedule. And doing it every 2 weeks will keep you off of a roller coaster of having a lot of nutrition for your plants, and then a nutrition deficit, and then a lot. 2 weeks just kind of keeps it steady. Yes?
I have a question. I'm using a bokashi way of composting. Can that just be mixed into my potting soil and leave it as is, or do I also need to do fertilizer?
If you're using the bokashi and mixing it in and using that as a fertilizer, I would have to look into it and see if you need to sterilize it first.
Oh, okay.
If you need to lay it out and put plastic over it and make sure it's a clean medium. It's still going to have the nutrition of the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, but that might save you some headaches by alleviating any
Fungus
pathogens.
gnats.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't like fungus gnats. No, sprinkle cinnamon on top of your soil. It helps a lot. Yeah, and so let's talk about the numbers, what that means. Does anyone know what the numbers on fertilizer refer to?
What's the other bottom there? The nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus?
Exactly. And so this is the percentage of those fertilizers in that mix. And so a balanced fertilizer would be a 5-5-5 or a 10-10-10, which it would be equal amounts of those 3 fertilizers. These are the most important nutrients that your plant needs to grow and to thrive. So yeah, we went over every 2 weeks. So this kind of, you can also, if you use the bokashi method, you could also perhaps make a tea out of it and use that as fertilizer. Yeah, and then diluted fish fertilizer is a good one. Yes?
What is this bokashi method?
A bokashi is a type of composting where you can compost waste and then bury it for a time, and so the pathogens do the work for you, and then you can use it as compost and a soil additive. So watering. This is what's going to allow your plants to uptake all of that good fertilizer that you spent time and money applying and giving to your plants. Containers, because they're a small amount of space, they dry out a lot faster than soil in the ground. So you're going to have to water more. And if you don't know when it's dry, touch it. If your soil is dry, an inch or 2 down, it needs some water. I usually wait for the first top inch to dry out, and then I water very deeply. It's definitely better to water less often and more deeply. It's going to allow the water to penetrate where the root zone is, and so the plant has a better chance of survival, of surviving rough weather. It's going to have access to better nutrients, which is going to make the food and the produce more nutritious for you as well. Yeah. So the soil should be like a well-wrung out sponge. It really should feel exactly like that. Here's a little watering can idea. It's kind of fun. You can heat up a needle, usually using a plier or something to protect you from the hot needle, and from the inside of the cap, heat it up with a lighter and then poke a hole, heat it up again, and poke as many holes as you like to get a little watering can. And this is fun to make with kids. I don't know, it's just a nice budget option. So plant selection, this is very important. There's many cultivars and types of plants that are created specifically for growing in pots. And these are going to help your chances of success. So when looking at it, you're going to want to look at, does it say compact? Does it say, container? You're going to want to look for all of those things on the seed packet. And then let's talk about what to grow. Does anyone have any ideas of something they want to grow in containers? Any favorite vegetables?
Tomatoes and peppers.
Excellent.
Asparagus, is that possible?
Yes, you can. Yes, I'm growing some in a pot right now, actually. And what's nice about an asparagus garden is once you plant it, it produces a lifetime. Yeah, apple trees especially like being planted with strawberries and asparagus underneath them. Yeah, it's a nice little.
Is our location good for artichokes, that type of?
Artichokes are a little more difficult. Last year was the first year I tried growing them, and out of 14, I have one that's surviving.
But you have one.
I have one.
A sturdy one.
Yes, I will take its seeds. We will move forward. But there is a new cultivar that they developed in Colorado for the shorter growing season and higher altitudes. And I think it's called Colorado Red Star. And so I would recommend, if you're going to do artichokes, do that. Plan on babying them. Plan on planting them somewhere where they can have consistently moist soil. That's going to be their largest challenge. Does anyone have any other plants about questions about specific plants, or maybe something they've seen?
I'm working on a fig tree in one of them. I've heard that they do better in pot, or sometimes do better in pot.
You can do a fig tree in either.
Okay.
I do recommend for a fig tree because they kind of thrive in a little bit warmer climate than here, is I plant them against a south-facing wall. So it's kind of a heat battery that will help insulate your plant throughout the winter to keep it a little warmer, and so it starts off in spring a little earlier.
What about squash and onion?
Onions and squash grow fantastically here.
Okay.
The only thing with squash is you have to watch out for the dreaded squash beetle. It's a nightmare. But with that, plant one blue Hubbard and use it as your trap plant, and then let them know you as the death dealer when you take the whole plant out. That's the way I do them. And then what was the other?
Onion.
Oh, onions. Onions are great. You can do onions and you can plant them in the spring or the fall. And they do fantastic in pots around flowers, around some other types of vegetables. They're really great, and they keep away a lot of the bad bugs.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
My favorite one. Garlic as well, is that similar to?
Yeah, garlic.
Okay.
Yeah, garlic we plant in September.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we also want to talk about how to maximize your harvest, because container gardening can be expensive. You're buying the soil, you're buying the pot, and you're having to water it. And so we really look for quantity and quality. So, things that have quantity, a plant that puts off a lot of produce is going to be very rewarding versus a plant that you're going to have to baby constantly and you only get a few little fruits off of. So cherry tomatoes proliferate and continually set fruit, and that's really nice. Pole beans, peas, they actually improve the soil of some of the other plants that you plant with them. That's called companion planting. Arugula and leaf lettuces are super easy to cut and come again. You just keep trimming them down and they keep growing, and that's lovely. Hot peppers also do very well here. Kind of the drier you keep them, the hotter they get. Quality. Herbs. Herbs are a great value if you like to cook at all. So, you know, basil, cilantro, parsley, thyme, any kind of herb that you get in a plastic packet in the store is going to be about $3. If you cook with fresh herbs twice a week, by the end of the year, if you're growing your own, you've saved $144. That's nice. I can go eat out for that. Yes?
I have a question about cilantro. I just moved here from Florida and I did find that the big gyms don't get hot in Florida. There's too much water.
True.
When do we plant cilantro? Because I was of the opinion it grows in the cool, when it's a cool part of the year.
It does like it. I do plant it in early spring.
Early spring?
I succession plant it throughout the whole growing season. Every 2 weeks I plant cilantro because I find here it bolts, which means it goes to seed so rapidly that it just makes sense to always have 4 little stations of cilantro. I always have cilantro.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you can just keep a little few pots going.
How does basil behave here?
Basil's great. Basil's very easy to grow here. I find it takes off really well. It likes consistent moisture. So again, well wrung out sponge, check your soil often.
I had trouble growing dill.
Dill can be tricky because aphids love dill. And so you'll want to plant it near other plants that repel aphids.
But
Off the top of my head. I never plant dill because I hate it.
Marigolds.
Yes,
Okay.
marigolds, pot marigolds.
Nasturtiums.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything in that kind of chrysanthemum family will do that. Feverfew, but that one might take over a little bit too much soil for you. Its roots become matted. So let's talk about the depth you need. All roots have a particular size that they like to grow to. And so you'll also want to talk about the space, think about the spacing between plants. So if you're going to plant an onion, it's usually 4 foot depth, 4 feet. 4-inch depth, 4-inch spacing, similar to green onions, Asian greens, lettuce, and radish. So I kind of plant my green onions in one big patch, and then I throw in flowers in there and just harvest as I need. Beans and peas need a little bit more depth, but they need less space in between because they can grow taller. And so that's a vertical plant that you can use to maximize your harvest by having it grow up other plants. And beans and peas also are nitrogen fixers, so they affix the nitrogen nutrient to the soil from the air. They're very helpful. Plants that need deeper, obviously root vegetables are gonna need a little deeper because their body takes up more space in the soil. And then spinach is nice. Again, you can grow it as leaf spinach or a big plant, cut and down. It's up to you. So different varieties, we spoke a little bit about this, but let's circle back. Cherry tomatoes are really nice because they're most of them are already made for container use, and so they're not gonna go wild. There are 2 different types of tomatoes. There's determinate and indeterminate. Has anyone heard those terms before? Okay, a few of you. So indeterminate means it's not determined where their end will be. They just keep growing and growing and growing. I've had a tomato grow this tall, flop back over, and start growing back up again. Whereas determinate are determined where they end. They're going to grow a certain size, and then they're going to put most of their produce off in that one big supply. So that's what you want to grow if you're canning, if you're freezing, if you want to process a larger batch all at once, you'll want determinate. Is there any questions about that? Again, bush type squash is going to keep compact, and so you'll have more space to plant other things. It won't trail all over your patio as far. Leaf lettuce You can plant those around the base of other plants as well in your container gardens, and then you can just trim them. And other compact varieties. Don't try and grow loofah gourd in a pot because it likes 15 feet. The vine will just keep going. So always look at the seed packet, and it should say the size the plant will be. And a lot of the seed packets also say the size of the pot they need. So to wrap up, the main things that we want to look at are placement, water, nutrition and fertilizer, and root depth. So that pot size, placement, water, nutrition, and light. Those are the biggest things that'll make you success. So yeah, using that fresh potting soil, you definitely want to refresh your soil from the previous year or use new. Fertilize often every 2 weeks is ideal. Some people put it on schedule the 1st and 15th of every month just so they can keep on top of it. Choosing the right size for the right plant. You don't want to fit into the wrong size of pants, and you don't want your plants to fit into the wrong size pot. It will stunt them, and you'll get less yield, less return on your investment of time and money. And then focusing on varieties and plants that are suited for container gardening will help you succeed and get the most cost benefit out of this. So you can learn more. I'm actually teaching this course in late March, and it's a 6-week course called Seed to Supper. It's hosted on the community garden at Presbyterian, and it's a great little place, and it's really nice. ICANN comes in at the end and shares cooking tips, and it's also supported by the food pharmacy, where they write prescriptions for healthy produce for people. And if you need any other information, you can always access there, and you can reach the Master Gardener Hotline. And so that's where people from the community can call in and ask any gardening questions you want. And volunteers from the Master Gardener program will answer those questions or look them up and call you back and give you those answers. And then Sally has the phone number. People want to write it down.
So the phone number for the Master Gardener Hotline in Bernalillo County is 505-292-7144. So 505-292-7144. There are programs in other counties as well. So if you move or you have friends in Santa Fe, Las Cruces, there's a program in Los Lunas. There's a lot, so you can just search for the Master Gardener program, New Mexico, and the information will pop up when you look for that.
Yeah, another good tip is when you're searching for anything you don't know, if you put extension office or NMSU, it will give you a greater specifics of, extension offices in particular study agriculture, and they're going to be a great resource of information that's vetted, and it's not just some made up information on the internet.